it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using this Hello Bluebird set called Coffee Friends. So I've stamped out my images on some Neenah Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my bunny, and I wanted her to be kind of buff colored, so I used E000 and E00. Started with the E00 and laid in some shadow on her ears and along the left side of her face and body, and a little bit on the right side of her face just to make it look a little more round. And I also accentuated her nose to make that protrude out just a little bit more. And then I blended that out with the E00, and I'm going to let that fade into the white area so it's nice and soft. And then I'll grab my colorless blender and go over the edge of that to just smooth the transition. I'm also going to use those shades to color in the white areas of the fox. I'm just going to be a bit more sparing with them because I want them to look like white areas but just have a little bit of shading to them. And it doesn't look like a white area right now, but once I get the orange for contrast on him, it'll look a little bit more like a lighter area with just a bit of shading on it. I use the colorless blender to smooth that transition into the white, and then I also am going to use these shades to color in the hedgehog skin, but this time I'm going to be a lot more heavy-handed, so I laid down quite a bit of that E00, and then I'm going to blend that out with the E000, and I'm only saving a tiny little bit on the face for that highlighted area. For the rest of the fox, I'm going to use YR12, YR14, and YR18. So I'm going to use the YR18 first to lay in a shadow where his tail is connected to his body, and then also along the back side of his body, so down the right hand side. I'm doing kind of a central light source today, so I have the shadows on the backs of all of the critters and the highlights on the front of them. So I added a little shadow to accentuate his nose and up on his ears, and then I'm going to start to blend that out with the YR14. This does happen to be my favorite combo for coloring foxes. I just think it's a nice natural kind of orangey because it's got a little bit of a brown undertone to it. So once I have that laid in, I'll come back in with my YR12. I'm going to fill in the rest of that white space, just carefully coloring around the little peaks of his tail, coloring in his little feet. I'm going to do something a bit different with those later on, but for now I wanted to have that orange base color underneath. And then I'll also fill in his face and his little ears. And then I'll use these shades to color in the beak and the feet of the little owl, which I just love. I think he is so cute. He might actually be my favorite image in this set, even though it's so hard to pick because they're all so darling. For the rest of the owl, I'll use E21, E23, E25, and E27. So I'm going to begin with the E27 to lay in my shadows on the underside of his ear and across the top of his head. Because he is turned a little bit more toward the viewer, toward the front, I'm going to give him less deep shadows on the right. He'll have more equal shadows on the left and right. So I did that first, and then I'm going to begin to blend that out with the E25. Just coloring over the edge of that E27 and getting that pigment to break up and blend into the next shade. Also adding some color to his wings and his little tail feathers. And then I'll come in with the E23 and I'm going to finish up his body with these shades. So I'm going to fill in all of that white space. So I'm saving that E21 for his belly and his eyes, that area around his eyes. So I'm just going to finish filling in his wings and his tail with that E23. And again, just making sure to color over the edge of the previous marker so that I get a nice transition from shade to shade. And then I'll use that E23 to be the shading for the lighter areas. So I added that up under the scarf and on his little legs and blended that out with the E21. And then I'll do the same for his eyes. Since I had the E21 in my hand, I just used that first. And then I'll come in and add a little bit of shading with the E23. And then I'll go back and blend that out. I'm also going to use these markers to color in the hedgehog. I'm just using the darkest 3 there. So I started with the E27, and because I want him to have that kind of spiky texture, I colored in little flicking motions, have little sharp ends, just by using the very tip of my marker to kind of create that look, and then blend it out with the E25, and then I'll fill in with the E23. And then I'll go back with that E27 and just add a few extra flicks to darken that back up. I'm moving on to the raccoon, and for him I'm doing W00, W1, W3, W5, and W7. So for the lighter areas of his body, I'm going to start with the W3. That's going to be my darkest for that. So I'm going to lay in some shadows, and just like the owl, he is facing forward, so his shading is going to be on both sides. So it'll just be like equal on the left and the right. So I laid all of his shadows in on his arms where they're bent and on his little haunches. And then I'm going to color in every other stripe on his body. So I skipped the one closest to him and did the 3 thinner stripes with these shades. And then I'm going to start to blend that out with the W1, making sure to go over the edge of that W3 and break up that pigment, get it nice and smooth. And I'll carry that color down on the bottom of his body as well, just saving a few little places for that highlight shade. Also coloring in on his tail. I'm going to leave the highlight on his tail for the top because that's where the light would be hitting. And then I'll fill in the rest of that white space with the W00. I also added just a little bit of that W00 on his belly and feet to keep those nice and light. Let those fade into the white areas. And then for the darker areas on his body, I'm going to start with W7. So I'll use that for the little patches around his eyes, and then also the other stripes on his tail. I'm going to keep that W7 as far away from his actual eyelashes as possible because I like to keep the eyes nice and visible. Otherwise, they can really get lost in there. So I'm using the W5 as my transition shade, and then I'll use the W3 as my highlight. And when I bring that into the W5, I'm going to make sure that that gets pushed back a bit so that you can see his eyes. And as these markers start to dry back, they'll be even more visible there. And then I'll finish off the little stripes on his tail with that W3 as well. For the tree stump, I'm going to use E50, E51, E53, E55, and E57. So I'm starting with that E57 down toward the bottom and on the top edges, kind of just leaving the shadows here and there since this is wood and it has different kind of bumps and shapes to it. It's not all nice and smooth. So just adding them wherever I think they should go. And then I'm going to begin to blend that out with the E55. Now I will say, and I've said this lots of times before, the E55 and the E53 do not like to play nice together. I keep trying to force it because I like the way they look together when they do, but they rarely do. For some reason, these markers just don't like each other. So I think I'm going to have to stop using this combination because I just, yeah, it's just not working like I want it to. So I did fill that in with the E53, but I didn't love it. And I went back with that E57 and kind of outlined the little lines that are drawn by the artist and blended that out with the E55 again. And then for the top of the stump, I used the E51 and then the E50 for the center. I also used the E51 and E50 for the two little to-go cups, the one in the hedgehog's hand and the one in the fox's hand. And before I put those markers away, I wanted to add some darker places on the fox's ears and feet. So I used the E57 for that and then blended that out with the E55. And that just makes him look a little bit more realistic. If you look up pictures of foxes, they often have little brown ears and feet. So I thought that that would be a cute detail. I also took that E57 and just colored in the coffee in each of the open cups. And then I'm taking RV10 and RV11 and I'm going to color in the insides of the critter's ears, the ones that have it showing, so everybody except for the owl. I also colored in the bunny's nose with the RV11. And then I will go back and give the critters some rosy cheeks with those shades as well. So I'm going to lay in the RV11 first, kind of just do a little oval shape, and then I'll come in and blend out the edges of that with the RV10. And I did that for the bunny and the fox and the raccoon and the hedgehog. So I skipped it on the owl because I just thought he was too dark, and the way that his eyes are, it didn't really seem to have a good place for it, so I just skipped it on him. I used W00 to color in anything that I wanted to be white, like the bunny's tail and the to-go coffee cup lids and bands. And now I'm ready to start coloring in all of my clothing and accessories. So for the bunny, I wanted her to have a little kind of purplish blue sweater, a little indigo. So I used BV01, BV02, and BV04. So I used the BV04 first for the shadow, put it mainly down the left side of her body, outlined her arm, and then any place where something would be casting a shadow, like that coffee mug on the right-hand side. I also put a little shadow on the area of the waistband there, and then I blended that out with the BV02, and then I'm going to come in with the BV01 and fill in the rest of that white space. And then I'm also going to do the raccoon's coffee cup with these shades. So just adding that shadow on the left and the right with the BV04. I'm blending toward the center with the BV02, and then I'll save a little bit of highlight for the BV01. And then I'll give the bunny a little peach colored scarf. So I'm using YR00, YR01, and YR02. So I laid in the shadow on the left hand side and then also a little bit on the right because the mug would be casting a shadow there. And then also on the piece of fabric that's coming out from behind. I blended out with the YR01 and finished with the YR00. And then I also colored the owl's scarf to be the same. I thought they could have little matching scarves. And I'll add some fun details to those later on, but the coloring needs to be completely dry. So for now, I'm just going to move on and do the bunny's mug. So for that, I'm using BG72, BG75, and BG78. The BG78 is super dark, so I'm using that just a little bit, and then blending out with the BG75, and making sure to get that handle, and then filling in the center with the BG72. So just pulling that BG75 toward the middle and then filling in that white space. I wanted to try to use each color combo in at least 2 places for their accessories, so I decided to color in the fox's sweater with these shades. I think orange and teal are a really pretty combination, so I thought that that would look really striking on him. So I just colored him with his shadows on his back. Since he's facing toward the left, they're going to be on the right hand side. And then I'll blend forward with the BG75 and then the BG72 for the highlight. So this color combo I'm actually going to end up using in 3 places because I also decided to color in the little hedgehog's scarf with these shades. I thought that color would look really nice against his darker brown and lighter brown colors as well. So I did the same colors, but I was just a little bit more heavy-handed with the darker 2 shades. So it just mixes it up just a little bit and creates a different dimension of those same marker shades. So my next color combo is blue, and I'm using B00, B41, and B45, and I'm going to do the fox's scarf. So I added some shading from the right hand side and back of him, and then also a little bit where his chin and the coffee cup would both be casting a shadow on the front, and then blend it out with the B41. And then I'm going to use the B00 as the highlight. I really like the way these colors look together. And then I'm also going to color in the raccoon's scarf and the owl's coffee cup with these shades. So I left pretty much all of the coloring in today's video. Often if I have multiple objects colored with the same marker shades, I will just color one of them on screen and then do the rest off screen just to save some time in the video. But a lot of you guys have been saying lately that you are coloring along with me while watching, which I think is amazing and so fun. So I didn't know if I should leave all of the coloring in the video or if you prefer for me to just color one object with the combo and then skip to the next one. So you guys let me know what you think about that in the comment section. But I'm just going to finish up this little raccoon, and then I'm going to start to add a few details to their scarves just because I think it adds some extra whimsy, and I've just been really enjoying doing that lately. So for the orange scarves, I wanted to add some polka dots. I started out with YR04, but they weren't dark enough, so I switched to YR14, which I also used on the fox, so I thought that would look really nice with it. So I did the bunny and the owl's scarf with those. And then I'm adding some stripes to the fox and the raccoon scarves. Actually, I'm going to turn it into a plaid. I started with the stripes in one direction, and then I'm going to draw them in the opposite direction to create that little plaid pattern. And for the hedgehog, I'm going to do some horizontal stripes using BG99. So it's just a little bit of a darker shade, so it will show up against that teal fabric. And now I'll trim these out with their coordinating dies. For my background, I'm going to take the Hello Bluebird skating pond scene and die cut that out of some white cardstock. And then I'm going to take a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock, and I'm going to do some ink blending with my Distress Oxide inks. So the first color that I'm putting down is Worn Lipstick, and I wanted to keep this background pretty light, so I'm being really careful to use a light amount of pressure to put that ink down so that, you know, it just doesn't get really in your face. I just wanted a really soft blend. The next shade I'm bringing in is Carved Pumpkin. I'm trying to create a soft sunset scene or sunrise, either way. So I'm tapping some of that ink off on the side and just blending across, and I didn't want that to get too dark, so it's not a great blend right now, but it's going to get worked over a few times as I move from shade to shade, so I just decided to leave it be, and I went back to my Worn Lipstick and blended a bit more of that to smooth some of that transition area out. Next, I'm going to bring in Speckled Egg, and Orange and blue don't really blend well together, but this speckled egg is kind of a unique blue. It's got a lot of gray tone in it as well. So I'm just laying it down really sparingly, kind of seeing how these colors play together and just keeping it nice and soft like I mentioned. And then I'll go back over that transition area a couple of times. Next, I'm going to bring in Evergreen Bough, and I will fill in all of the top area with that. I'm trying to tie in some of the colors that I used for the accessories on my little critters. So this is kind of representing that teal color, just in a little softer format. So I'm going to blend over the transition area again. And then I actually have one more shade that I wanted to squeeze on there. So that's going to be Stormy Sky. And this one I'm just going to add at the very top and kind of mimic the little indigo sweater that I had on the bunny and the other accessories with that shade. So I'm just adding that across the top and then going over that transition area one more time. And then I'm going to take that skating pond die and die cut that out so that I get all of those little in-between bits. So now I'm ready to start assembling this little scene. So I'm going to add some liquid glue all around the frame and that little bottom snowdrift that kind of got stuck there, but it was going in that space anyway, so I just decided to leave it. And then I'm going to line that up carefully with the edge of the card and make sure it's on there nice and straight, and then smooth that down into place. And then I'm going to just start filling in the rest of these pieces just like a puzzle. So I'm going to take the next section. This is normally the skating pond, so it should be a river, but in my scene it's going to be another snowdrift. So I just left it white. And then I'll add the third snowdrift up at the top there of that section. And from here on out is where it gets a little bit trickier, but it's really not too bad. What I did was I left the die cut pieces together on my cutting mat, and I'm going to carefully peel out each of the little sections that I need. So the first section that I need is this little bit of the sunset. It's going to go all the way over to the left. And then I'm going to take the next tree in white and glue that one into place. I'm not going to worry about the little pieces in between the branches right now. I just want to get like the main pieces fit into place first. So I'll take that next larger piece of sunset sky that goes in between the trees, and then I'll take the next white tree and fit that into place as well. And I'm trying to work quickly because if there needs to be any adjustments, I want to be able to make them while this liquid glue is still wet, because once it dries, it is permanent. So I'm just kind of moving along as quick as I can, making sure to get that glue all the way even on the little ends of things so that everything is adhered down nice and flat. And then I'll take that final section of the sunset and make sure everything is nice. I had to do just the tiniest bit of adjustment, but everything was really well fitting together. Then I'm going to take my liquid glue and just add that in the little spaces in between the branches. And then one by one, I will pick up those trees and pull out the little sections that I need and pop them into place to fill in all of those little spaces. So the background is looking a little bit plain, so I want to add a few details with more Copic coloring. So I hope you guys are here for the Copic coloring for this video, and if you're not, I'm sure you left a long time ago. But anyway, taking that BG 000 and adding a little bit of a frosty glow on the top of each snowdrift. Then I'm blending that out with the BG 000, just real quick and easy. And then I'll grab my colorless blender and go over the edge of that and just soften that into the white, just like I usually do, just to make things nice and smooth from each of the transitions. And then I'm going to make the trees in the background birch trees. So I'm starting with the W7 and I'm doing little flick marks from the left and right, and also taking that up on the little skinny branches as well. So I'm doing thinner ones up there and then thicker swipes as I get down toward the trunk of the tree, just to kind of give it that birch tree look. I love birch trees. They're one of my absolute favorite trees, so any chance I can get to color them, I love. Plus, they're real quick and easy to do. Next, I'm taking the W5 and I'm going to swipe over the edges of some of those. Also add a few little flicks by itself just to add a bit more color and depth on there, just so it's not so, super dark and stark. I always like to have, shading mixed in there. So once I have that laid in, I still feel like it needs just a little bit of shading on the edges. So I grabbed my W1 and I'm just going to really quickly go down the left-hand sides of each of those little branches and give them a bit of an outline, and then I'll also do the right hand side of the trunk. So once that's done, I have popped that into my MISTI and I'm going to stamp my sentiment down on the very bottom snowdrift on the right hand side. And since that was a new sentiment, I just wiped that first with my picket fence stamp scrubby, and then I'm going to stamp that down with Lawn Fawn Hippo ink, and I'm going to stamp it out a couple of times so that it's nice and bright, since it's super small down in that little corner there. And then I will open up my card to the inside so that I can stamp another sentiment. I'm using the one that says "Thanks a Latte" and the little squirrel image, which is the only one that didn't fit on the front of the card. I stamped that down a few times as well with Peachy Keen ink, and now I'm ready to adhere my images. So I'm going to start with the little fox, since he's kind of the largest image, and he is going to go up towards the top of the card on the right hand side. I think he looks so nice against that sunset. It just really brings out those peachy tones there. And then I'll add the bunny kind of mirroring him on the left. Then I'll add the little stump that's going to go right in the center of our scene here. And I'm going to put the raccoon sitting on top of that. And again, I'm working quickly because I want to be able to make any adjustments while that liquid glue is still wet. So I'm going to add the little owl next because I knew that he was going to possibly be overlapping the squirrel. So I just wanted to put him on the card so I could see exactly where I wanted that raccoon to be. And I did move him just a little bit lower and to the left. And then finally I'll add my little hedgehog down in the bottom left corner. And then all that's left is to add my crystal stickles, which is my favorite embellishment, and I just can't make a snowy scene without it because it just adds so much of that like frosty, frozen glow on everything. So I'm going to add it all over the lightest shade of gray on the trees, in all the little dips of the branches where the snow would collect, and then also on the edges of the trunk that are showing. So on the two on the far left, it's on the left, and then on the tree that's on the far right, it's on the right hand side, as the other sides are covered up. I also added it to the top and label of the to-go coffee cups and to the bunny's whipped cream. And then I also added it to all of their little mugs, and I decided to put it in their ears as well because I just think it's kind of soft and pink and pretty, and so it's just fun to have that little sparkle. And for the owl, I put it on his nose. And I was going to stop there, but I decided to add it to the snowdrifts as well. but I thought it might be too much to have like a solid line on each of those snowdrifts, so I did little lines and dots, kind of breaking it up a bit. I'll lift that up to the camera so you can see how it catches the light and see all of that detail up close, and then give you another peek at the inside. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know it was super long, but if you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell. It really means a lot, helps my channel so much. If you're interested in any of the products that I used today, you'll find those listed and linked below the video. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one of those to check them out. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.